Rich man falls in love with a homeless woman. What happens next is unbelievable. Sebastian strode down the bustling city street, his polished leather shoes clicking against the pavement. The mid-morning sun reflected off the towering glass buildings, casting shimmering patterns on the sidewalk. He was dressed impeccably, as always, in a tailored navy suit that matched the sleek lines of his luxury car parked nearby. In one hand, he carried a coffee cup from the most expensive cafe in the area, the logo gleaming subtly in gold against the crisp white cup. To any passerby, he was the embodiment of success, wealth, power, and confidence radiating from every step he took. But inside, Sebastian felt the weight of something he couldn't quite name. A hollow kind of discontent had been growing for months, though he kept it buried beneath the surface. Work consumed his days, and expensive dinners with equally successful friends filled his evenings. Yet, even surrounded by luxury, he felt profoundly alone. As he neared the entrance to his office building, a familiar sight caught his attention. A cluster of homeless people sat near the edge of the sidewalk, their belongings packed in tattered bags, their faces lined with exhaustion. Most pedestrians walked past them without a second glance, their eyes fixed on their phones or the ground. Sebastian had done the same countless times, telling himself there was nothing he could do. But today, something or someone made him pause. She was sitting slightly apart from the others, her back against a brick wall, a small notebook in her lap. Her hair was dark and unkempt, but there was a quiet dignity in the way she held herself. Her clothes were old and worn, but clean, as if she'd taken great care despite her circumstances. As Sebastian watched, she reached into a battered bag and pulled out a sandwich, splitting it in half. She handed one piece to the man sitting beside her, a frail-looking figure with a thin, shaky smile. "Thanks, Emily," the man murmured, his voice barely audible over the noise of the street. Sebastian frowned slightly, the name lingering in his mind as he turned to enter the building. He shook his head, trying to focus on the tasks ahead. He had a meeting with investors, and they wouldn't be impressed if their host arrived distracted. The day passed in a blur of spreadsheets, presentations, and polite smiles that barely masked the tension in the room. By the time Sebastian returned to the street, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the city. He loosened his tie and sighed, glancing toward the spot where the homeless group usually sat. To his surprise, most of them were gone. Only the young woman remained, her notebook still in her lap. She was sketching something with quick, deliberate strokes, her brow furrowed in concentration. He hesitated for a moment before approaching her, unsure why he felt compelled to do so. "Excuse me," he said, his voice breaking the quiet. She looked up, her brown eyes sharp and guarded. "Yes." He paused, suddenly unsure of what to say. "I saw you this morning. You helped that man." Her expression softened slightly, though her posture remained cautious. "He's been sick. Couldn't keep food down yesterday." Sebastian nodded, feeling out of his depth. "That was kind of you." Emily tilted her head, studying him. "Kindness doesn't cost anything," she said simply, her tone neither defensive nor condescending. For a moment, they stood in silence. Sebastian glanced at the notebook in her lap, noticing the intricate drawings she was working on. It depicted a cityscape, the details so precise it looked almost photographic. "You're talented," he said, gesturing toward the sketch. She shrugged, closing the notebook. "It's just something I do to pass the time." "It's more than that," he said, genuinely impressed. "Have you ever thought about pursuing it professionally?" Emily let out a short laugh, though it lacked humor. "Not exactly easy when you don't have a roof over your head." Her words stung more than he expected. He fumbled in his pocket and pulled out his wallet, extracting a few bills. "Here," he said, holding them out, "for your art supplies. Or anything else you need." Emily's expression hardened, and she didn't reach for the money. "I'm not a charity case," she said evenly. Sebastian blinked, caught off guard. "I didn't mean." "Thank you for the thought," she said, cutting him off. "But I don't take handouts." He nodded slowly, slipping the bills back into his wallet. "I'm sorry if I offended you." "You didn't," she said, her tone softening. "I just prefer to make my own way." He nodded again, unsure of how to respond. "Well, if you ever need anything." She gave him a small, almost wistful smile. "Thanks." Sebastian turned and walked away, her words echoing in his mind. Kindness doesn't cost anything. He thought about the cold, transactional nature of his own world, where every action seemed to come with an unspoken price. Over the next week, Sebastian found himself thinking about Emily more often than he cared to admit. He started noticing the ways people ignored those who lived on the streets, the way society seemed to render them invisible. It gnawed at him, this growing awareness of the disparity between his life and theirs. One morning, as he walked past the usual spot, he saw Emily again. She was crouched beside an elderly woman, helping her adjust a makeshift blanket. Sebastian hesitated before approaching her. "Good morning," he said, trying to sound casual. Emily looked up, her expression wary but not unfriendly. "Morning. I was wondering," he paused, feeling foolish, "if you'd let me buy you a cup of coffee." She raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. "Why?" "Because I'd like to get to know you better," he admitted. "And I'm guessing you have some interesting stories to tell." She studied him for a long moment before nodding. "All right," she said, "but only if I can pay for my own." He smiled, the first genuine smile he'd felt in days. "Deal." Their coffee meeting lasted far longer than Sebastian had expected. Emily was sharp, insightful, and refreshingly honest. She spoke openly about her struggles, her dreams, and the small joys she found in unlikely places. By the time they parted ways, Sebastian felt as though he'd learned more in those 2 hours than he had in years of corporate meetings. As he watched her walk away, he knew one thing for certain: Emily had changed something in him, and he wasn't ready to let her disappear from his life. The days following their coffee meeting felt different for Sebastian. His work, once all-consuming, now seemed hollow in comparison to the conversations he had shared with Emily. Her perspective lingered in his mind, the way she found meaning in small, overlooked moments, and her quiet determination to rebuild her life despite everything stacked against her. Sebastian began visiting her regularly. He would bring her coffee or sandwiches, though she always insisted on sharing whatever he brought with the others in her community. They sat together on the bench near her usual spot, their conversations growing deeper with each encounter. One afternoon, as the autumn sun cast long shadows across the street, Emily shared more of her story. "I wasn't always out here, she began, her voice steady but tinged with sadness. "I used to have a job, an apartment. Nothing fancy, but it was mine." "What happened?" Sebastian asked gently, his gaze fixed on her. She hesitated, fiddling with the edge of her notebook. "My mom got sick. Cancer. I used everything I had to pay for her treatments. Sold my furniture, gave up my place. I thought I'd figure it out afterward, but life doesn't always work out the way you plan." Sebastian felt a pang of guilt. He had never known that kind of struggle. His wealth had always been a safety net, shielding him from life's harshest blows. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. She shrugged, though her eyes betrayed her emotions. "It's not all bad. I've met good people out here. People who look out for each other in ways you wouldn't expect. And I've learned a lot about myself, about what really matters." "What does matter?" he asked, genuinely curious. Emily smiled, her gaze distant. "Kindness. Connection. Knowing that someone sees you, really sees you, and doesn't look away." Sebastian nodded, her words resonating deeply. For so long, he had felt unseen in his own way, hidden behind his success and the expectations of others. Emily's honesty was like a breath of fresh air, cutting through the pretenses that often clouded his world. One evening, Sebastian decided to take a chance. He invited Emily to dinner, suggesting a small, casual restaurant that he thought she might feel comfortable in. To his surprise, she agreed. When she arrived, she wore a simple dress she had found at a thrift store, her hair brushed and pulled back neatly. Sebastian greeted her with a warm smile, his heart skipping a beat at the sight of her. "You look beautiful," he said sincerely. Emily blushed, her usual composure faltering slightly. "Thanks. You clean up pretty well yourself." They settled into a corner booth, the soft glow of the restaurant's lights creating an intimate atmosphere. As they ate, Emily's guard began to lower, and Sebastian found himself opening up in ways he hadn't expected. "I never told you this," he said, setting down his fork, "but I've always felt like something was missing. Even with all the success, the money, it never felt like enough." Emily studied him, her expression thoughtful. "Maybe that's because you were looking for the wrong things." "Maybe," he admitted. "But meeting you has changed that. You've shown me what real strength looks like." Her eyes softened, and for a moment, they simply looked at each other, the connection between them growing stronger with each passing second. Word of Sebastian's friendship with Emily began to spread. It started with curious glances from people who recognized him as they sat together on the street. Then came the whispers among his colleagues, some of whom found the situation amusing, while others viewed it as a potential scandal. At first, Sebastian tried to ignore it. But when a colleague cornered him at a networking event, he realized the situation was becoming more complicated. "Sebastian," the man said, his tone dripping with faux concern. "I heard about your new friend. Is everything all right?" "Yes," Sebastian replied coolly. "Why wouldn't it be?" The man chuckled, shaking his head. "It's just unexpected, that's all. People are talking." "Let them talk," Sebastian said firmly, walking away before the conversation could continue. Later that night, he told Emily about the encounter. "Are you sure you're okay with this?" she asked, her brow furrowed. "I don't want to make things harder for you." "You're not," he said, taking her hand. "I don't care what people think. You matter to me, Emily. That's all that matters." Her eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away, a small smile playing on her lips. "You're too good to be true, you know that? Or maybe you're just bringing out the best in me," he replied softly. Despite his resolve, the backlash grew. Someone snapped a photo of them together and posted it online, sparking a flurry of speculation and criticism. The headlines were brutal: "Billionaire heir befriends homeless woman. Charity or scandal?" Sebastian's family caught wind of the situation, and the fallout was immediate. His father, a stern and pragmatic man, called him to the family estate for a meeting. "What are you thinking, Sebastian?" his father demanded, pacing the study. "This could ruin your reputation." "Or maybe it could change it for the better," Sebastian replied calmly. His father stopped, turning to face him. "You're being reckless. People like her don't belong in our world." Sebastian's jaw tightened. "People like her? You don't even know her." "Emily has more integrity and strength than most people I've met in this world. She's not one of us," his father said coldly. "And she never will be." "Then maybe I don't want to be one of us anymore," Sebastian shot back. "Because if that's what it means, I'd rather stand with her." His father stared at him, stunned into silence. Sebastian turned and walked out, his heart pounding with a mix of anger and determination. Sebastian returned to his apartment that evening, his mind racing with the conversation he'd had with his father. The cold dismissal of Emily as not one of us replayed in his head, each word fueling his resolve. He thought about everything Emily had taught him, not with lectures or grand gestures, but through her unwavering dignity, her kindness, and her resilience. She had shown him the kind of strength that money could never buy. When he finally sat down to text her, the words came easily. "I need to see you." Emily replied within minutes, "I'm at the shelter. Meet me here." The shelter was a modest building tucked between two crumbling storefronts. Inside, the air was warm and filled with the sound of quiet conversations. Emily was sitting at a table, helping a young boy with his homework. She looked up as Sebastian walked in, her face lighting up with a smile that made his heart ache in the best way. "You found me," she said, setting the pencil down. "Always," he replied, sitting across from her. "I needed to talk to you." She tilted her head, her expression soft but curious. "What's on your mind?" He hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath. "My family found out about us, and they're not happy." Emily's smile faded slightly, replaced by a look of concern. "Sebastian, I don't want to come between you and your family." "You're not," he said quickly. "They're the ones creating the distance, not you. And I'm not going to let them dictate my life." She studied him, her brow furrowing. "But they're your family. That's not something you can just walk away from." "I'm not walking away," he said, "but I won't let them push you out either." "You mean too much to me, Emily." Her eyes softened, and she reached across the table to take his hand. "I don't want to cause trouble for you, Sebastian, but I care about you. A lot." He squeezed her hand, his voice steady. "Then we'll figure this out together." The following weeks were a whirlwind of challenges and small victories. Sebastian continued to see Emily despite the growing scrutiny from his family and the media. Their bond deepened with each passing day, their connection growing stronger in the face of adversity. Emily, too, began to see herself in a new light. With Sebastian's encouragement, she started volunteering at the shelter where she had once sought refuge. Her natural compassion and intelligence quickly made her a favorite among the staff and residents. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of purpose. But the world outside their bubble was less forgiving. Photos of them together continued to circulate online, accompanied by cruel headlines and invasive speculation. One particularly harsh article labeled Emily a social climber, accusing her of using Sebastian for his money and status. The accusations stung, though she tried not to let them show. Sebastian, however, was furious. He confronted the journalist responsible, demanding a retraction, but his efforts only seemed to fan the flames. "They're just looking for a story," Emily told him one evening as they sat in his apartment. "Don't waste your energy on them. I can't stand seeing them treat you this way," he said, his voice tight with frustration. "You don't deserve it." She smiled softly, placing a hand on his cheek. "I can handle it, Sebastian. I've faced worse." The breaking point came at a charity gala hosted by Sebastian's family. Despite his reservations, he brought Emily as his guest, determined to show the world that he was proud of their relationship. She wore a simple but elegant dress, her hair styled in loose waves. Sebastian thought she looked stunning, though he could see the nervousness in her eyes. "You don't have to do this," he whispered as they stepped out of the car. "Yes, I do," she replied, her voice steady. "For us." The room fell silent as they entered, all eyes turning to the couple. Whispers rippled through the crowd, some curious, others judgmental. Sebastian held Emily's hand tightly, his expression calm but firm. His mother, Eleanor, approached them with a forced smile. "Sebastian," she said, her tone icy. "And Emily, how lovely of you to join us." "Thank you for inviting us," Emily replied, her voice polite but not submissive. Eleanor's smile faltered, and she turned to Sebastian. "May I have a word with you?" "Anything you have to say, you can say in front of Emily," he replied. Eleanor's jaw tightened, but she nodded. "Very well. I just hope you realize the complications this relationship is causing. For you and for the family." "The only complications are the ones you're creating," Sebastian said evenly. "Emily has done nothing but show strength and kindness. If you can't see that, it's your loss." Before Eleanor could respond, another guest approached, his voice loud and mocking. "So, this is the famous Emily," he said, looking her up and down. "Quite the rags to riches story, isn't it?" Sebastian stepped forward, his jaw clenched. "Watch your tone," he warned. But before he could say more, Emily spoke up, her voice calm but firm. "You're right," she said, meeting the man's gaze. "It is a rags to riches story, but not because of Sebastian's money. Because I found someone who sees me for who I am, not where I came from. Can you say the same?" The room fell silent, the man's smug expression fading. Sebastian looked at Emily with pride, his love for her growing even stronger. The confrontation at the gala left a mark on everyone present. While some guests quietly admired Emily's composure and strength, others whispered among themselves, exchanging judgmental glances. For Sebastian, the night solidified his commitment to Emily. She had faced their harshest critics with grace, and he couldn't have been prouder. But the fallout was immediate. The next morning, tabloids were flooded with pictures and sensationalized headlines. Billionaire heir defends homeless girlfriend at high society gala and power couple or publicity stunt. The truth behind Sebastian and Emily. Sebastian's phone didn't stop buzzing. Calls from his family, friends, and colleagues came in rapid succession, most of them expressing concern or outright disapproval. Despite the onslaught, he refused to back down. Emily, meanwhile, found herself grappling with a newfound attention. The shelter where she volunteered became a focal point for reporters, their cameras and questions invading what had once been her sanctuary. She tried to ignore them, focusing instead on her work, but the pressure was mounting. One afternoon, as she was helping organize supplies, the shelter's director pulled her aside. "Emily, we need to talk," he said, his tone apologetic. "The media presence has been disruptive. Some of the residents are uncomfortable." She nodded, her heart sinking. "I understand. You've been such a valuable part of our team," he continued. "But maybe it's best if you take some time away until things settle down." Emily felt a lump form in her throat but managed to keep her voice steady. "Of course. Thank you for everything." She left the shelter that day feeling adrift. It wasn't just the loss of her routine. It was the realization that her relationship with Sebastian was affecting every aspect of her life. When she told Sebastian what had happened, he was furious. "That's not fair," he said, pacing his apartment. "You've done nothing wrong." "It's not about fair," Emily replied, sitting on the edge of the couch. "It's about reality. Your world and mine. They don't mix. They can, he insisted, sitting beside her. We'll make them. She looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of love and doubt. Sebastian, I don't want to be the reason your life falls apart. You're not, he said firmly. You're the reason it's coming together. His words hung in the air, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Emily leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. I hope you're right, she whispered. The backlash from the gala didn't just affect Emily. It also caused ripples within Sebastian's family. His father called an emergency meeting at the estate, summoning Sebastian, Eleanor, and Clara to discuss what he referred to as the situation. This has gone too far, his father began, his voice stern. Our family's reputation is at stake. Reputation? Sebastian shot back. This isn't about reputation. It's about me living my life the way I choose. You're being naive, Eleanor interjected. Do you really think this relationship can last? Clara, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke up. Why not? Maybe they're exactly what each other needs. Stay out of this, Clara, Eleanor said sharply. No, Clara replied, her voice rising. I won't. You've spent so much time worrying about what people think that you've forgotten what really matters. Sebastian loves her, and from what I've seen, she loves him too. Isn't that enough? The room fell silent, Clara's words hanging heavily in the air. For the first time, Sebastian saw a glimmer of doubt in his parents' expressions. It wasn't much, but it was a start. As the weeks passed, Sebastian and Emily faced more challenges, but also found unexpected allies. Clara became one of their strongest supporters, often defending them in conversations with friends and family. Even some of Sebastian's colleagues began to change their tune, recognizing Emily's strength and intelligence through articles and interviews she participated in. One day, Sebastian had an idea. Why don't we do something together? He suggested as they walked through the park. What do you mean? Emily asked, curious. A project, he said. Something that combines our strengths. You've always talked about wanting to give back to help people like you. Let's create something that makes a difference. Emily considered his words, a spark of excitement lighting up her eyes. Like a foundation. Exactly, he said. We could focus on housing, education, job training, whatever you think is most important. I love that idea, she said, her smile widening. Let's do it. The announcement of their foundation made headlines, but this time, the response was overwhelmingly positive. Critics were silenced by the genuine passion and thoughtfulness behind their initiative, and supporters rallied around them, inspired by their commitment to change. Emily threw herself into the work, meeting with community leaders and crafting programs that addressed the root causes of homelessness. For the first time in years, she felt like she was making a tangible difference. Sebastian, too, found a new sense of purpose. Working alongside Emily reminded him of why he had pursued success in the first place, not for the wealth or status, but for the ability to create meaningful change. Despite their progress, challenges remained. Sebastian's parents were still resistant, their approval withheld even as the foundation gained traction. And while the media had shifted its tone, there were still whispers and doubts about their relationship. One evening, as they sat on the balcony of Sebastian's apartment, Emily voiced her fears. Do you think we'll ever really be accepted? She asked, her voice quiet. He took her hand, his gaze steady. I don't care about being accepted, he said. I care about us. As long as we're together, nothing else matters. She smiled, leaning into him. You always know what to say. The foundation quickly became a beacon of hope for those in need, with Emily at the forefront. She poured her heart into every project, drawing on her own experiences to craft programs that truly made a difference. From funding transitional housing to organizing skill-building workshops, she proved to be not just a figurehead but the driving force behind their shared vision. Sebastian couldn't have been prouder. He often attended events and meetings with Emily, watching as she commanded respect and admiration. Still, there were moments when her confidence wavered, usually in the face of persistent scrutiny from the media or subtle jabs from high society circles. At one such event, a gala held to celebrate the foundation's success, Emily found herself cornered by an older woman with an air of superiority. You must be very proud of what you've accomplished, the woman said, her tone saccharine but edged with condescension. It's remarkable what a little support can do for someone. Emily felt the familiar sting of judgment but refused to let it show. She met the woman's gaze evenly. Support is important, but it takes more than that. It takes determination, resilience, and a willingness to learn. Those are the qualities we try to nurture in the people we help. The woman raised an eyebrow, clearly taken aback by Emily's poised response. Well, she said, recovering quickly, I suppose you would know. I do, Emily said with a small smile. And I'm happy to share what I've learned. Sebastian, who had been observing the exchange from a distance, couldn't help but smile. Emily's ability to disarm her critics never ceased to amaze him. While the foundation thrived, Sebastian's relationship with his parents remained strained. His father, in particular, had grown increasingly distant, refusing to attend any events associated with the foundation and avoiding discussions about Emily altogether. Sebastian knew the rift wouldn't heal overnight, but the lack of support still weighed heavily on him. One evening, as he sat in his study, he received an unexpected call from Clara. Have you talked to Dad lately? She asked. Not much, Sebastian admitted. Why? He's been different, Clara said hesitantly. I think he's starting to regret how he's handled things. Sebastian frowned. Really? He hasn't said anything to me. Give him time, Clara said. I know it's hard, but he's proud, and admitting he was wrong doesn't come easily to him. Sebastian sighed, running a hand through his hair. I don't care about being right. I just want him to see Emily for who she really is. Clara's voice softened. He will. Just keep doing what you're doing. Meanwhile, Emily was facing her own challenges. Despite her growing confidence and success, the weight of her past still lingered. She couldn't shake the feeling that she didn't truly belong in Sebastian's world, no matter how hard she worked to prove herself. One night, as they sat together on the couch, she finally voiced her fears. Do you ever wonder if this is too much? She asked quietly. If we're trying to force something that just doesn't fit? Sebastian turned to her, his expression serious. What are you talking about? She hesitated, looking down at her hands. Your family, the media, society. It feels like we're constantly fighting to justify what we have. Maybe it's not fair to you. He took her hands in his grip firm but gentle. Emily, listen to me. What we have is real. And yes, it's hard. But nothing worth having is easy. I don't care what anyone else thinks. You belong here, with me. Her eyes filled with tears, and she leaned into him, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know what I'd do without you. You'll never have to find out, he said, pulling her close. The next major milestone for the foundation was an ambitious project, converting an abandoned building into a community center that would offer housing, job training, and counseling services. The initiative required significant funding and support, and Sebastian and Emily threw themselves into the effort. At the groundbreaking ceremony, Emily gave a heartfelt speech that left many in the audience moved to tears. This isn't just about bricks and mortar, she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. It's about giving people the tools they need to rebuild their lives. It's about hope, dignity, and the belief that everyone deserves a second chance. The crowd erupted into applause, and Sebastian felt a surge of pride as he watched her stand tall, her passion shining through. But not everyone was supportive. A few days later, they received word that a major donor had pulled out of the project, citing concerns about the foundation's controversial leadership. Emily was devastated. This is my fault, she said, pacing the living room. If it weren't for my background, we wouldn't be facing this. Stop, Sebastian said firmly. This isn't on you. If they can't see the value in what we're doing, that's their loss. But what if it's not enough, she asked, her voice breaking. What if we can't make this work? We will, he said, his tone unwavering. Because we have to. And because I believe in you. Despite the setback, they refused to give up. Sebastian reached out to his network, securing new donors and rallying support for the project. Emily threw herself into organizing community fundraisers, drawing on her connections and her story to inspire others. The tide began to turn. Donations poured in, and the project moved forward. By the time the community center was completed, it was clear that their determination had paid off. At the grand opening, Sebastian and Emily stood together, surrounded by supporters and residents who had already begun benefiting from the center's services. As they cut the ribbon, the crowd erupted into cheers, their shared triumph evident in every smiling face. As the community center flourished, it became a symbol of hope for the people it served and a testament to what Sebastian and Emily could achieve together. The media, which had once been so critical, began shifting its narrative. Articles praised their perseverance and the tangible impact they were making. Headlines like "From Adversity to Triumph" how one couple is changing lives began replacing the negative press. Emily, however, remained cautious. She knew how quickly public opinion could change, and despite their progress, the nagging voice of doubt lingered. She often found herself wondering if the life she was building with Sebastian could truly withstand the pressures they faced. One evening, as they walked through the city, Sebastian noticed Emily's unusual quietness. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked, nudging her playfully. She smiled faintly, but didn't meet his gaze. "I'm just thinking about everything. The center, the foundation, it's a lot." "It is," he agreed, his tone gentle. "But we're handling it. Together." She stopped walking, turning to face him. "Are we, though? It feels like we're constantly fighting to prove ourselves, to your family, to society, to everyone." He reached for her hands, his expression serious. "Emily, I know it's hard, but look at what we've accomplished. Look at the lives we've changed. None of that would have been possible without you." Her eyes softened, but the worry didn't completely fade. "I just don't want to hold you back." "You're not," he said firmly. "You're the reason I've grown into the person I am today. And I'm not going anywhere." Meanwhile, tensions with Sebastian's family reached a boiling point. His father, who had remained steadfast in his disapproval, finally demanded a meeting. "This has gone on long enough," his father said as Sebastian entered the study. "You need to reconsider this relationship. It's causing more harm than good." Sebastian's patience, worn thin by months of conflict, snapped. "What harm exactly? The harm of seeing people's lives improve? The harm of learning what it means to truly care about someone?" "You're being naive," his father replied, his tone sharp. "This relationship will never work. You come from different worlds. And maybe that's exactly why it does work," Sebastian shot back. "Emily has taught me more about strength, resilience, and compassion than anyone I've ever known. If you can't see that, then maybe it's you who doesn't belong in my world." His father stared at him, his expression unreadable. After a long pause, he said quietly, "You're making a mistake." "No," Sebastian said, his voice steady. "The mistake would be giving up on someone who means everything to me." The confrontation left Sebastian shaken but resolute. He shared the conversation with Emily later that evening, and while she appreciated his unwavering support, it deepened her fears about their future. "Maybe he's right," she said quietly. "Maybe this isn't sustainable." "Don't do that," Sebastian said, his voice tinged with frustration. "Don't let him plant doubts in your mind." "It's not just him," she admitted. "It's everything. The scrutiny, the judgment. Sometimes it feels like too much." He took her hands in his gaze unwavering. "Emily, I love you, and I'm willing to fight for us, no matter what. But I need to know you're with me." Tears filled her eyes as she nodded. I always will be." The turning point came at a high-profile event celebrating the community center's success. Sebastian had invited his family, hoping to bridge the gap between them and Emily. To his surprise, both his parents agreed to attend, though their intentions remained unclear. The evening began smoothly, with speeches from local leaders and testimonials from individuals whose lives had been transformed by the center. Emily, as always, spoke with poise and passion, her words earning a standing ovation. As the applause died down, Sebastian's father approached the podium. His presence drew murmurs from the crowd, many curious to see what he would say. "I wasn't sure what to expect when I came here tonight," he began, his tone measured. "I'll admit, I had my doubts about this project, and about the people behind it." Sebastian tensed, his jaw tightening as he braced for the worst. Emily stood beside him, her expression calm but guarded. But his father continued, "After seeing the impact this center has had, and hearing the stories of the people it's helped, I realize I was wrong." Gasps rippled through the audience, and Sebastian's heart skipped a beat. "My son and Emily have done something extraordinary," his father said, his voice steady. "They've shown me what it means to truly make a difference. And for that, I am proud of them." The crowd erupted into applause, and Sebastian turned to Emily, his eyes filled with emotion. She smiled, her own tears glistening as she whispered, "I told you he'd come around." The evening marked a new chapter for Sebastian and Emily. With his family's support finally secured, they felt a renewed sense of strength and purpose. Together, they continued to grow the foundation, their love serving as the cornerstone of everything they built. The evening at the community center marked a profound turning point, not just for Sebastian and Emily, but for the people who had been following their story. The applause lingered in their hearts, a testament to the impact they were making together. But more importantly, it was the moment that began to heal the rift between Sebastian and his father. In the days that followed, Charles, Sebastian's father, made a genuine effort to mend their strained relationship. He reached out to Sebastian, asking for time to talk, not as a business tycoon or a critical parent, but as a man who wanted to understand. "I've been stubborn," Charles admitted over dinner one evening, his voice quieter than Sebastian had ever heard it. "I thought I was protecting you, but I see now that I was holding you back." Sebastian studied his father, searching for any trace of insincerity, but found none. "It means a lot to hear you say that," he said, "but I need you to understand that Emily is my future. She's not just someone I'm trying to save. She's the one saving me." Charles nodded, his gaze thoughtful. "I see that now. She's remarkable, and I'd like to get to know her better, if she'll have me." Emily, for her part, welcomed the olive branch with her characteristic grace. Though wary at first, she agreed to meet Charles for lunch. The conversation was tentative at first, but as they spoke, Emily's authenticity began to break through his guarded demeanor. "You remind me of someone I once knew," Charles said, surprising her. "My grandmother. She was the strongest woman I've ever met. She always said that real wealth isn't about money, it's about character." Emily smiled, touched by the sentiment. "Your grandmother sounds like someone I would have loved to meet." "She would have liked you," Charles replied with a small smile. "I think she would have liked you a lot." With Charles's support, the family dynamic began to shift. Even Eleanor, who had been the most resistant, started to soften. She attended a foundation event with Clara, observing from the sidelines as Emily worked tirelessly to connect with the attendees. "She's not what I expected," Eleanor admitted to Clara as they watched Emily share a laugh with a group of volunteers. "What did you expect?" Clara asked, her tone curious but not confrontational. Eleanor sighed. "I'm not sure. But whatever it was, I was wrong. Maybe it's time to tell her that," Clara suggested gently. In the months that followed, the foundation continued to grow, expanding its reach and impact. The community center became a hub of hope and opportunity, offering everything from job training to mental health services. Emily's leadership was instrumental, personal story inspiring countless people to believe in second chances. Sebastian, too, found a renewed sense of purpose. Working alongside Emily gave him a deeper appreciation for the power of connection and compassion. Their love, once tested by the weight of societal expectations, now felt unshakable. One evening, as they stood on the balcony of their apartment overlooking the city, Sebastian turned to Emily with a thoughtful expression. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice steady but tinged with emotion, "about everything we've been through. The challenges, the criticism, and how we've come out stronger." Emily looked at him, her eyes soft. "What's on your mind?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Her breath caught as he opened it, revealing a simple but elegant ring. "Emily," he began, his voice filled with love, "you've changed my life in ways I never thought possible. You've shown me what it means to truly live, to love, and to fight for what matters. I can't imagine my life without you. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down her face as she nodded, unable to find the words. She threw her arms around him, her voice breaking as she whispered, "Yes, 1,000 times yes." The announcement of their engagement was met with an outpouring of support, not just from their friends and family, but from a community they had worked so hard to uplift. The wedding, a beautiful yet understated ceremony, brought together people from all walks of life, a true testament to the love and unity that Sebastian and Emily embodied. As they stood together, hand in hand, exchanging vows under a canopy of stars, it was clear to everyone present that this was more than just a union of two people. It was the culmination of a journey that had defied the odds, bridging two worlds that many thought could never coexist. In his vows, Sebastian said, "Emily, you've taught me that love isn't about perfection or appearances. It's about seeing each other for who we truly are and choosing each other every day. I choose you, today and always." Emily's response was equally heartfelt. "Sebastian, you show me that love can be a safe place, a home where I can be myself. I promise to stand by you, to build with you, and to always believe in us." As they danced under the twinkling lights, surrounded by the people who mattered most, Sebastian and Emily knew their journey was just beginning. Together, they had faced the doubts and challenges of the world, and together, they would continue to create a life filled with love, purpose, and hope. The community center, the foundation, and their love story became symbols of what could be achieved when people dared to believe in one another. And as they looked into each other's eyes, they knew that their most unbelievable chapter was yet to come.